So I have a saying that I started to use probably about 10, 12 years ago, maybe further back than that. I'm not really sure. But when I'd see these politicians that said something that's clearly not true, the question I always ask is this person stupid? Meaning, do they believe the stuff that's coming out of their mouth? But they just aren't smart enough to know that what they're saying is not accurate, or that what they're saying is not true. Or, so either are they stupid, meaning they don't know what they're saying, or are they aware of what they're saying, but they're aware that what they're saying is a lie, so that they're knowingly saying something that is not true. So I'd like to ask, are they stupid or are they lying? Because they can't be both. Because you can't believe some of the stuff that you're saying and be smart. So anyway, I have a couple of examples that I'd like to show you. And then I also want to show you or talk about kind of how they're trying to twist the Rittenhouse case into something that it's not. And it just gives you an idea of the next push that some of these politicians are planning to make. So the first one that I want to read to you is, this comes from Columbus City Council President Shannon Hardin. Shannon Hardin, in response to the Rittenhouse verdict, said, "This started because Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by Kenosha police. He did not have a rifle, but he is now paralyzed from the waist down. The verdict today in Wisconsin is not justice and would have been different if Kyle Rittenhouse was black. Rittenhouse is free because of lax gun rules and insane laws that encourage people to shoot first and ask questions later. These laws create anarchy, not safety. The Ohio State House pushes this trash legislation year after year. It's maddening. Nevertheless, we've got to keep fighting this dangerous legislation. Our only choice is to work harder tomorrow." All right, let's break this down a little bit. So in the beginning, he says, this all started because Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by Kenosha police. Well, what was Jacob Blake doing at the time he was shot 7 times in the back by Kenosha police? He had already been accused of sexually assaulting his child's mother. He was in the middle of kidnapping his children from his child's mother. He had an active warrant for his arrest. He was fighting with police officers and was reaching into his vehicle for a knife that most likely he was going to attempt to use on those officers. And for that, he was shot by the police. What they did was justified. That's the end of that part. So yeah, he is paralyzed from the waist down. If he wouldn't have gone for a knife and done all those things, he would have been fine. I know what that has to do with Rittenhouse. Well, yeah, it does, because that's what started it. It was started by a bunch of people who don't know facts, don't care about facts. All they care about is some weird agenda and keeping people divided, and they chose to use that as an opportunity to go out and start burning down buildings. That's what started this. The verdict today in Wisconsin was not justice, and it would have been different if Kyle Rittenhouse was black. I'm going to save that line for the end of the video, or for the second half of the video. Rittenhouse is free because of lax rules and insane laws that encourage folks to shoot first and ask questions later. So here's what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. If you watch the trial, you'll know this. There was a dumpster that was lit on fire. People were pushing that dumpster into a gas station with the intent on burning a gas station to the ground, potentially causing a giant explosion. This is bad. So Kyle used a fire extinguisher to put the dumpster fire out. For that, he was attacked by a man who earlier in the night threatened to kill him. So Kyle Rittenhouse ran after putting the fire out, with a man chasing close behind, a man who had already threatened to kill him earlier in the night. Seconds later, someone else directly behind Kyle Rittenhouse fires a couple rounds from a pistol. Kyle, believing that the person who was chasing him, who had already told him, "I'm going to kill you," Kyle believing that that person had the gun and it was actively firing on him, Kyle turned and he shot and killed the child molester that was chasing him. So if you want to talk about, where does he say it? Lax gun rules. Why don't you talk about the guy who was behind Kyle Rittenhouse, who was not allowed to have a firearm, but had one anyway and was firing off rounds? There was I don't know the exact order of all these different events, but one of the people that Kyle shot was hitting him in the back of the head with a skateboard. And then another person that Kyle shot was standing over him with a pistol in his hand, pointing it at Kyle Rittenhouse. That person was also not legally allowed to have a firearm. So for some reason, this politician thinks that it's a good idea to attack the one person who legally was in possession of a firearm, rather than to criticize the two people who were illegally in possession of a firearm. So they're using the one guy who was doing it legally to try to push an agenda to create more gun laws. What else do we have? Oh, here's Senator Sherrod Brown. I can't do his voice. He has like this horrible smoker voice. He says, "This is not justice. It's long past time for justice reform and gun safety reform." Again, there were two people who were not legally allowed to have a firearm. Those people got shot. The one person who was legally in possession of a firearm did not get shot. He survived. And because he survived, Senator Sherrod Brown thinks we need to have laws. Basically what he's saying is that we need to change the law so that Kyle Rittenhouse would have died that day. Those are his thoughts on that. And then here is Andrew Ginther, the mayor of the fine city of Columbus, Ohio. "I cannot comprehend the Rittenhouse verdict and how a jury could confuse vigilante justice with self-defense. 2 people are dead because our country's ridiculous infatuation with guns." Let's talk about that first sentence for a little bit. Cannot comprehend the Rittenhouse verdict and how a jury can confuse vigilante justice with self-defense. Let's talk about vigilante justice for a minute. Maybe the vigilantism that he's referring to are the groups of people who march up and down the streets who say, "No justice, no peace, no justice, no peace." And if you get in their way, they kick the shit out of you. Maybe that's the kind of vigilantism that he's talking about. Or maybe he's talking about the people who like to block the road, and then when someone with multiple sclerosis pulls up and tries to get down that road, you pull him out of his car and you beat the crap out of him and you destroy his car. Is that the kind of vigilantism that you're talking about? Or maybe you're talking about the groups of people who are marching up and down the streets of Kenosha, lighting buildings on fire, lighting car dealerships on fire, pushing garbage trucks in the road so that police would not be able to respond, and then lighting those on fire. Are those the people that you're criticizing when you say, how can a jury confuse vigilante justice with self-defense? How can you confuse a riot with a protest? That's my question. So anyway, now he continues on. "Because our laws put assault weapons in the hands of people who have no lawful reason to carry them, Rittenhouse is free because our criminal justice system does not treat all crimes and people equitably." Because our laws put assault weapons in the hands of people who have no lawful reason to carry them. So Kyle Rittenhouse was being pursued by 2 people who were illegally carrying firearms. He was the only person who was legally carrying a firearm that day. Does that fact sink into anybody? So he's saying that because the one guy who was in legal possession of a firearm survived. That's what he's saying right there. Rittenhouse is free because our criminal justice system does not treat all crimes and all people equitably. Because he wouldn't be free today if he wasn't carrying that gun. He'd be dead. "We need criminal justice reform, and changes to gun safety laws are long overdue." So I just read you 3 statements by 3 prominent politicians, all calling for new gun safety laws. They're not calling for gun safety laws. They're calling for gun control. Anyway, now, here's a picture that I want to show you, because he said that all people are not treated equitably. I want to show you this gentleman right here. His name is Jerron Joseph. Notice the pigment of his skin. It's going to play a factor here in a minute. This is going to come back to Mr. Hardin's comment where he said it would have been different if Rittenhouse was black. So I'm not sure what this is, but I know that there's a certain pigment of this skin that's not the same as Kyle Rittenhouse's. I just want you to take note that it exists. Now we're going to go to this criminal case. This is in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. This was a offense of improper handling of a firearm. That is a felony. Felony cases are held in the Court of Common Pleas. But here it says that he pled guilty to a lesser included offense and ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor charge. Let's go back to the cases, and here's what happened on the day that Mr. Jerron Joseph was arrested and charged with improper handling of a firearm. So the first case, this occurred on September the 8th, 2020. He was charged with aggravated menacing and domestic violence threats. Cause belief of imminent physical harm by threat of force. So what this means, aggravated menacing, means that you're threatening to cause somebody serious physical harm. Domestic violence threats means that this is a family or household member. Most likely it was some kind of baby mama situation. And he caused that other person to believe that they were in imminent danger of serious physical harm. That's why you have those 2 charges. Then right down below, this was also on the same day. This is on September 8th, 2020, the same day as those other charges. He is charged with felony improper handling of a firearm. So if you know anything about how the law works, he was charged with aggravated menacing and domestic violence threats and improper handling of a firearm all on the same day. So what that means is that he had a gun and he was threatening to shoot somebody with it. So this charge was dismissed and it was carried over to the Court of Common Pleas because that's where felony cases are heard. And here is the sentencing disposition sheet. It was his felony case was brought down to a misdemeanor. He pled guilty to that, and he was given time served for his 52 days that he had spent in jail. So on a felony gun charge, this guy got 52 days in jail. Now, when I was looking into his cases, I went down a little bit, and I was kind of surprised to find out, where is it? Yep, this is the one. So on March the 25th, 2017, Mr. Jerron M. Joseph was charged and then later convicted of domestic violence. So in the state of Ohio, if you have a conviction for domestic violence, you are no longer allowed to have a firearm. That was in 2017. So then in 2020, let me bring him up. So in 2017, this guy right here in this picture was charged and convicted of domestic violence. So he's no longer allowed to have a firearm. In 2020, he was charged with threatening to shoot somebody out of a domestic violence case, and he was caught in possession of a firearm. Can you wrap your head around this for a moment? Baby mom says, my baby dad threatened to kill me. He's got a gun. The police find the guy who threatened her, and he has a gun on him at the time. He should be looking at multiple felony charges. His domestic violence case should have been enhanced to a felony because he had a prior domestic violence conviction. So he should have had a felony domestic violence case and a felony firearms case. But instead, he had his charge reduced and he was given 52 days of time served. Now, why do I bring this up? Rittenhouse is free because it lacks gun rules and insane laws that encourage people to shoot first and ask questions later. These laws create anarchy, not safety. The Ohio State House pushes this trash legislation year after year, and it's maddening. Nevertheless, we've got to keep fighting this dangerous legislation. Our only choice is to work even harder next year. My point is that we don't need more legislation. We don't need to change the legislation. There's nothing wrong with the legislation. There's no laws that allow people to illegally shoot people. The problem is that we don't enforce the laws that we have. You don't get 52 days in jail after you already have a domestic violence conviction and you're caught threatening somebody else with a gun and you have a gun in your possession. That's not how our laws are intended to be adjudicated. So now I want to ask you again. Are these people stupid or are they lying? In my opinion, they know full well that the laws we have on the books are adequate and that they're not being properly adjudicated. What they're doing is they're lying to you, and they're hoping that people are weak-minded and not educated enough to understand these things for themselves. And they're preying on those weak-minded individuals so that they can help consolidate more power for themselves, because that's all they really care about. Those are going to be my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.